All right, thank you all very much. Please come on in, have a seat. I know it's been a very engaging and interesting day, and there's lots of conversations that are ongoing, and we promise we'll have time to complete them. We'll have 2 hours together after this panel, but it really is my pleasure to be here and with these amazing, inspiring women and to introduce our partner in all of this, Monique Owens, the Regional Director from USGBC.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good, good. You know, it's the last session of the day. So my name is Monique Owens. I'm the Regional Director for the Mid-Atlantic and New England region for USGBC. We're really excited to be back in person to see people outside of the Zoom box. So thank you for making the trip to come out and see this great panel that we have planned for today. So as everyone, for the folks that aren't aware, USGBC is committed to transforming buildings and communities through LEED. So I'm really thrilled today that we have the opportunity to collaborate with SUNY ESF on this panel. It's a great way to kick off Women's History Month as well. So if you're interested in getting involved with our New York upstate community, please feel free to reach out to myself or Rebecca Bentley, who's our point of contact for our New York community. So with that being said, I am going to kick it off. It's my honor and privilege to be with this great group of panelists that we have today. Our moderator will be President Mahoney from SUNY ESF, so I will pass it to her now. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique, and thank you, Katrina, and welcome to everybody. We were just saying the same thing about being in person. It's so nice to have everybody here all together, and I'm really honored to be asked to moderate this esteemed panel. And we decided that we are going to have everybody introduce themselves. We're calling it our 3 minutes of brilliance. So no pressure, right? We'll start down on the end. How about that?
Good evening, everyone. I am Martha Campbell. I am with RMI, formerly known as Rocky Mountain Institute. I am a principal on our carbon-free buildings team, and I've been there about 10 years. I guess my story, I was telling others 3 minutes is just not enough time to tell my long, convoluted story. But I'm originally from El Paso, Texas, and was born and raised there, and had the opportunity to attend Stanford University and then went on into finance, right? Which is what everyone does when they get a big break. But I woke up one day and just, you know, my father had passed away, and I realized this is not what I had envisioned myself doing. And so I left, I traveled, I went to Australia, I stayed at an off-the-grid hostel in the Grampians. And it was that little seed that got planted that made me really passionate about green construction or sustainability. And I've done everything from community organizing to building earthships in northern New Mexico. And I just wanted to try it all. I wanted to see, you know, where could I fit into this landscape of sustainability? And what ultimately happened was I read the book Cradle to Cradle and felt that I could marry my background in finance, you know, with making an impact on the environment. So I went back and I got my green MBA and a master's in environmental science in conservation ecology and sustainable finance from the University of Michigan. And after that, I ended up at RMI, and everything I've learned about buildings, I've learned on the job there over the last 10 years. I still have so much to learn, and I always appreciate being around a community like you all. But while I was there, I founded our Realize initiative, and Realize is focused on decarbonizing existing buildings using more industrialized approaches or processes so that we can accelerate the speed of decarbonizing existing buildings while using that to help compress costs and obviously hit that scale that we need to keep ourselves at a 1.5 degree future. So that has evolved into also creating the Advanced Building Construction Collaborative with the US Department of Energy. So I think I'm supposed to also tell you what the thing is that I'm proudest about in my career. And it doesn't actually have anything to do with buildings. It was working on the 2008 Barack Obama presidential campaign in northern New Mexico. And it was a really interesting time to be working on campaigns because at least in northern New Mexico, we were using Google Maps to try and target people. We were being told, go out, canvass, knock on doors. And the majority of the addresses that we had were wrong. So how do you reach the electorate, if you can't find them physically? And so we had to build this war room where we had pictures of Google Maps cells on the wall, and then we would go out and we knock on people's doors, get their names, put their address down. And on the day of the election, we had to use this mobile technology where it would tell you if someone had voted, and then we used that geotagging system to literally go and find people that hadn't voted, and we achieved the highest voter turnout rate in the country. So, I was, 20 something years old then, and I feel like I had a big impact. So that to this day is I still want to feel that rush of like, we won. And I don't know what it looks like for us in Green Building, but that was amazing. So thank you.
Excellent.
Okay, that was a very inspirational act to follow. My story is vastly different. I began my career in the Navy, first doing intelligence work for Desert Storm. So that is really dating me for those of you who were born when that was happening. And then I went on to do submarine analysis work, and that's going to figure back in later. But with the submarine analysis work, I covered things for the entire Russian Pacific Fleet, needed to know where they were every night from Pearl Harbor. And what I really liked about that job was using all these different inputs to figure that out, right? And so that's kind of been a theme throughout my career. That and then just doing things that go just a little bit against the grain. So within 6 months of women being allowed on combat ships, I was on the USS Nimitz and deploying over to the Persian Gulf on that. I had very young children at the time, and so we made the choice to jump to corporate America, which was a whole new thing. But I've been with Corning now for 23 years. It's the only company that I've worked for. And there I have had a number of different commercial experiences. I've done new business startup. I've done competitive intelligence. I've done innovation management. And for the last 2.5 years, I have been the director of sustainability for our life sciences divisions. And I think that, looking back on everything, it really built up to the role that I'm in right now. That sounds strange, given where I started. But for me, it's more about the skills you bring to the table, and they're very transferable, I think, across a lot of roles. And it's been this curiosity. It's been just diving in off the deep end. I've been involved in a number of different industries that kind of prepared me for that. And then it is pulling a lot of those different pieces together to make the story and make things sing and hang together. And so being in the sustainability role, I was the first director in the company to start up this function within our company at our division level. And so it's all been a lot of invention and pulling together all the pieces. And as you know, sustainability is a fire hose of information. It's just changing all the time. And so it is a terribly exciting space to be in, and I love it. So my favorite thing is now. Thank you.
Christie, you failed to tell everyone your name. So it's Christie McCarthy.
Christie McCarthy.
Thank you very much.
Well, a little bit against the grain, I think everybody in this room is with that vibe. So yeah, thanks for saying that. I'm Leia Sims. I am VP of Engineering Services at BlocPower. And it all started way back when. But seriously, I mean, I was raised by a couple of entrepreneurial environmentalists. When I was in high school, we were changing my childhood home to all electric. So I got to be part of a geothermal installation. As I was heading into college, my brother was finishing college and started a solar installation company. So that's what I did when I was not at college. I helped him grow and do that business. And there was something that happened for me when I was on the roof of a McMansion and looking at the dual Hummers in the driveway, thinking, I think there's something else that we can, consider before mitigating our loads. And so I finally landed on my degree of choice, which happened to be construction management with a focus in sustainability. And at that point, all of my peers are saying, what the hell are you doing? Like, nobody's going to pay for this stuff. Why are you wasting your time? Sticking with, staying against the grain, and I'm going with it, So first job out of college was Stephen Winter Associates. For me, it was like, yeah, I have made it, like that was a dream job to have when I was in college. So but a year later, I quit that job to happen to be like the height of the 2008, the housing crash. And I quit that job to take up an opportunity. New Jersey had just launched their Home Performance with Energy Star program. So I started my own home performance contracting business. And that was a great experience. I mean, I was, building teams and doing energy audits and spraying foam and cellulose and, teaching crews how to do stuff in the field and freaking loving every minute of it. I mean, it's really hard, don't get me wrong, but it gave me a lot of compassion for when I went back into the sustainability consulting world, compassion for the others, doing that hard work and how to kind of like help to bring them up along the way. And instead of just giving them a, hey, you failed report, here's how you can do it better, and helping them out with that process. So yeah, super happy to now be back in that implementation world with BlocPower, doing this on a huge scale and training workforce out there. And it all has kind of tied together. I mean, this is living my dream for real.
That's great, Leah. Thanks.
Feeling the pressure with the clapping here. I'm like, oh, from the first one they don't clap for. There we go. I made it.
Pressure's off.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Doreen Harris. I'm the president and CEO of NYSERDA, and this is, I think, my third speaking engagement for the day. So I do know where I am. However, I told the team I'm not telling you what I'm going to say, so I'm probably have them nervous. But Team NYSERDA, come on. I have to. So certainly I think about myself as I was in STEM before there was a thing called STEM. I didn't even know it was a big deal to be interested in technology and engineering until I got to college and realized, oh, wow, I'm like the only woman in the room. Who knew? But I was the kid taking apart my mom's sewing machine and like putting it back together. She didn't even know the difference. Like that's who I am. And ultimately pursuing a degree in engineering was the right fit for me. But ultimately, I think engineering degrees, as I'm sure many of you have and many of you know, can take many, many different forms. And ultimately, my moment of brilliance, come on, my moment of brilliance was not attending school for petroleum engineering at Texas A&M, which I was accepted to, and I had an apartment and everything. And I made a major career decision when I was 21 years old or 22 years old, which I don't know how anyone makes a decision when they're 21 or 22. But at the same time, there was a North Star that's present in me and that is present in all of us and in all of you, which is really focused on how does one spend one's time and how does one spend one's time to, make not only the world a better place, but to use one's skills in that respect as well. And so, the engineers, the architects, the, analysts, all of us building a better future together was a decision that I made in my moment of brilliance for sure. As to As to areas of pride, I'm getting old, so I'm starting to forget what happened early in my career. But I will say specifically in not only being at NYSERDA and working for the state for what has been well over a decade at this point, this past December represented an extraordinary moment of pride for me because after 3 years, 30 plus meetings, 35,000 public comments, 11 hearings, and 22 of my best friends on New York's Climate Action Council, we had a vote to adopt a scoping plan in December of 2022, which passed quite affirmatively. And yeah, right? And I'm super proud to not only live in a state, but work in an administration that has these principles at its core. And for me, the moment of pride should be that we're working not only here in the state, but in ways that allow us to lead the way for others, which is really what we need to be part of, which is this global movement that we all represent. So there you have it, my moment of pride. Thank you.
That's great. Okay, this is a very hard group to follow.
Here, here.
I know. This is, my name is Laurie Kutina. I am a vice president for WSP Corporation. We are an international corporation. We have about 15,000 people in the United States, about 63,000 internationally. And as a global company, we are working towards sustainable practice in all different areas, including transportation, buildings, and a bunch of different areas. I started my career actually as an air quality scientist. And I did my first greenhouse gas inventory as a contractor for the Department of Energy, I'm gonna say this, over 2 decades ago, when everyone's like, what is a greenhouse gas inventory? So that was beginning of looking at what carbon meant within organizations. I then worked for a smaller company called Ecology and Environment, which is an environmental firm that some of you in the room up here in upstate New York might be familiar with, but we were acquired by WSP about 4 years ago. And as the most exciting thing to me was that at that point in my career, it gave me the opportunity to work with within and be folded into the Sustainability, Energy, and Climate Change Division of WSP. And I work with about 150 of the most talented, experienced, excellent colleagues that have just a huge wealth of knowledge within WSP. A couple of them are here too with me today. And the really exciting thing is that we get to work with corporations, we work with government agencies. The nice thing is I get to sit on this panel with a couple of my clients here. And we really are working with all of those type of organizations that our job is to decarbonize the world, and we're going to do it. And it's really exciting. It's exciting to work with lots of young people that are going to drive all of this and teach them and learn from them. And, you know, those are the pieces that I love to do. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
I will tell you briefly my story because I think there's value in people hearing the different paths that land us where we are. Even though I'm the moderator, I'll take my opportunity to do that. And I'll tell you that I come to this world starting out as a little kid visiting national parks and just really appreciating nature and the outdoors. And I had an uncle that was president of the American Meteorological Society. He was this brilliant scientist, and he was doing work on acid rain in the Adirondacks in the 1980s. And so I was exposed to the issues with the environment at an early age. But I graduated undergrad with a degree from the management school at Syracuse University, and not in STEM, which was not my moment of brilliance, because I really admire those who really understand the science and are moving the needle. But I graduated also from law school. I spent time as a prosecutor, believe it or not, for 5 years. And then I was a stay-at-home mom. I was home with my 4 sons for 11 years before I lucked out and was elected county executive here in this county, Onondaga. And I had the opportunity there to work with people on a Superfund site. And it was the most meaningful part of the job because we wanted to do it right. We didn't want to just see if we could comply. We wanted to do things well. And I'll say our biggest moment of pride in that role was creating a program that we called Save the Rain, which was the first, it was the first consent order in the federal government that was requiring green infrastructure as opposed to just gray. So we created this Save the Rain program and focused on green infrastructure and keeping the rainwater out of the combined sewer overflow. And I loved going around the country and telling everybody all about it. And when the time came, I thought it was time for new blood in the county. I didn't know exactly what my next move would be, but the job as president of SUNY ESF became available. And my brilliance really was a stroke of luck. And that was being at the right place at the right time. And now I'm the president of SUNY ESF, and I get to work with students and faculty every single day that are doing this work and people like here. And I just say one thing before I launch our first question, and that is, you know, a lot of you talked about being at the beginning, like people wanted to know what was a greenhouse gas inventory, right?
Yeah.
And so while we can get discouraged about how long it seems like it's taken, it's really remarkable the work that's been done. And there is reason for us to be inspired, certainly by all of you. So I tipped Doreen off and I said, I will give you the first question. And then I'm hoping to generate a little bit of conversation among us. Doreen, what helped you get to where you are in your industry?
Sure, I'll give it a shot, at least as I said, what I can remember. No, literally, and this is something I obviously have had many mentors in my career, but now I'm on the other side of the equation here. And my general advice is actually something that helped me an awful lot in my career, which is fundamentally that you need to be good at something. And by that, I mean, everybody has a general set of skills and general things to bring to the table, but really focusing on sort of where you have a particular point of expertise and where you want to dig in and be the expert, like the go-to person for whatever it is. Even if like today, I cannot do the things that I was really good at, 20 years ago, you have to find a way in which to not only establish yourself as an expert in something, but to use that to give yourself exposure to other things as well. And certainly as a young engineer, those were technical problems I was solving at that point. I worked in energy really my whole career. And in many places I was solving technical issues at various facilities and the like. But a great example at NYSERDA. So I am the first president of NYSERDA who actually came from the staff of the organization. And I started in 2010 in NYSERDA. And like Joni, actually, I have 4 kids, Team 4 Kid Club. Life takes a few twists and turns along the way when you're busy, whatever you're doing with 4 kids. Yeah, I don't remember that either, thankfully. But this is the kind of situation where the days are long, but the years are short. And ultimately, when you get yourself focused on your career, and when I came to NYSERDA, I was very focused on what I viewed as sort of making up ground, which is not really true, but like that's how I felt in my heart. I wanted to make my mark on my program. So I was hired in the programs and the renewables programs in NYSERDA, but I love buildings too, don't worry. And really, we had some projects that were like not the most exciting projects going on. Sometimes work is mundane, but ultimately I dug into the projects in which I was assigned. And really what I found myself doing was finding ways to make my mark at NYSERDA. And my mark really took the form of looking at the impacts of all of these projects that we were building around the state, and ultimately beginning to take my technical knowledge and turn that into a narrative that is in fact based in data to say, like, here's what the impacts are, folks. Like, here's the jobs, here's the people, here's the difference that we are actually making on the ground. Because I think we all know that this transition is about more than just green electrons or a BTU saved. It's about literally change and people understanding that change. And so I took that area of expertise and really scaled it up, both with respect to awareness at the organization, but also broader awareness around the world, ultimately, about how these projects advance. And so when I think about that in today's day and age, I think that it is all too easy to sort of go early in one's career and sort of be expecting to be, sitting, in a leadership position. I think the foundational expertise that each of us can bring in whatever way we have really needs to be nurtured and scaled, again, over a series of years. And then the rest will definitely come.
I think that's great advice. I wonder if any of you has that similar experience of having to be really good at something, right? Instead of a jack of all trades.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, anybody who really knows me knows like air sealing and envelope upgrades are like, I am so obsessed. But anyway. Oh, I'm
We
embarrassed.
need to
No.
talk because I have trouble with my roof right now. So before you're done.
So not sexy, but anyway, give me a caulk gun and
Oh yeah, we're gonna talk.
But I mean, I think also like you have to know your expertise and your passion, but also know where it fits in cross-functionally, where you're gonna fit, where that piece fits in with the rest of your team, with the rest of your organization, with the rest of the industry, how to communicate that passion and expertise to people who, don't find air sealing sexy. So, so that's my, my kind of piece on that.
I was curious what you thought about the notion, because we're a panel of women in green, right? There is certainly conventional wisdom among people my age anyhow, about having to work harder, be better. I'm curious whether that has been an experience you've had along the way.
I will take that one. So I've worked in a lot of areas where men were very predominant, in the Navy. On the aircraft carrier was a very extreme example, 5,000 men, 500 women, right? And so you stand out by your uniqueness. I was walking around the Naval Postgraduate School, again, right after that tour, and everybody knew me. And I would be like, who are you and why are you talking to me? But it's because you stood out, because you were a woman and they were mostly men. So I think that, some of that is you deal with that and you figure out how to navigate it. But I think also, the things that are going to make you successful will make you successful whether you're in a room full of women or a room full of men, right? And so, and so this goes to the men out here in the audience too. Find what you're good at, but also keep that flexibility, right? My career has been wacky. I started out in competitive intelligence on the corporate side. I went to commercial stuff. I've ended up in sustainability. Nobody has that career path, but it opened up. And so I was good at certain things. I'm very good at process. I'm very good at coming up to speed on issues quickly. But then you just take everything else in, and so you don't have to have it all figured out when you're 21, I don't think. And thank God for that, right? But be flexible and be confident in yourself. And I think that's going to take you a really, really long way. And I think we as women, what you men out there should know is that we do put extra pressure on ourselves. We do as mothers, we do as employees, we do as leaders. It's just the way we're built. Sometimes corporate America can be very mean in a regard where men will stretch and women will fail doing the same things. And so, what I've done is I have bumped my head up against that glass ceiling and I am cracking it as hard as I can for all the women coming after me.
How about if we start, Martha, with you on this one? What is a piece of practical advice that you would give to someone starting out? How can someone who's not in a leadership position create positive impacts on their company or community?
Yeah, sure. And I think some of the things that were just being discussed obviously are a base for that. Figure out what you're good at. But I also think that there's this period of time where you don't know what you're good at and you need to be good at your job. And I think that everyone's in a hurry to like move up the ladder because there's all these stories about these wonder kids who became CEOs when they were 18 or something like that. And that happens, but it's not going to be the norm for most people. And I don't think it needs to be. I think if you take time to learn how to do your job well and you do it well, then you earn people's respect. So then the second thing is to focus on relationships, get to know your peers, especially in this, virtual environment that we find ourselves in. I think it's really hard to create connections. So you might have to spend more time, asking if you can do a one-on-one with someone, over Zoom, or a coffee if you obviously get to work with people in person. And invest that time in getting to know your colleagues and what pieces of brilliance they have, because most people have some sort of knowledge. And then once you've established relationships with people, then you have the social capital to say what you think we should be doing, or we as an organization, wherever you find yourself. And so that third piece of it is being able to effectively communicate what your vision is and why do you want to do it, and how does it benefit others, and being able to speak to their interests. And so focusing on how to communicate effectively and sort of win people over, through the power of influence, and also communicating a compelling case, I think is how you can affect change no matter where you are in an organization. So that's kind of my way of thinking about it. Obviously easier said than done, but don't think that you can't affect change within an organization and that you can't start things. So I'm going to answer the question that you actually posed to Doreen, which is the way that I have gotten to where I am in my career is I saw something that needed to be done, and I went and I raised a little bit of grant funding for it, and then I raised a little bit more, and we kept having these successes until it's grown into an actual large initiative within the organization. And so I think that some of it is seeing what needs to be done and making that happen, and taking whatever little win you can and running with it. So that's my advice.
If I could just, one thing I think that's interesting, and it's applicable to kind of what you were talking about, and also the challenge that everyone in this room is dealing with in terms of how we're going to address climate change, how we're going to become more sustainability with what we're doing. And there's a difference between something being difficult and it being hard. And things that are difficult are complicated. You need new solutions for them. Things that are hard require grit and decision making, and they are very difficult in that sense. So sometimes I feel like sometimes you can separate those things, because doing the hard things create that advancement, whether it's in your own career or it's in your company. But for the most part, we know what we need to do there. It's just getting there. The difficult things can be because technically we don't know what the solution is, so we need to figure it out. But sometimes it can be just the red tape that's involved, because some people don't want to do the hard things. So I feel like as you go through your careers, try and think about that difference and figure out, are you trying to do the hard things and get things done? Or are you doing the difficult things that are hard to solve? Or are you doing the difficult things that are just kind of running around in circles? And if you can sort that out, you can go very far helping all of us do what we need to do. So,
yeah, I think that's an interesting distinction. And I'll say that in my experience, a lot of people don't want to do what it takes to do those tasks. And so there's an opportunity to stand out if you are willing to just do the next thing. And I'm going to finish this project. I'm not just going to have another meeting and talk about it and put it on an agenda and come back again next week. And did anyone move the ball forward? No, when you start being the person that's coming back with your tasks, your action items completed, then I think you start to stand out and you'll see yourself progress wherever you are, because that isn't how everyone behaves. I think a lot of people just want to get to the end of the day, right? And it's not so much about completing the task, it's completing the day. The other thing, and I'd be curious how you would react to this in terms of really basic practical advice, something that's helped me is to not be afraid of confrontation. And I'm not really confrontational, but I do stand my ground and I do speak up if I see that I don't think something's right. And I think that's a piece of advice that I could have used in my 20s. I had to learn it along the way. And it's an art, to be able to push back. And I think it's valuable. It's a valuable skill to have. So I don't know if any of you have a practical tip like that for people.
Yeah, I want to build on what you just said there. I think you're absolutely right with the confrontation. And I think, being in the industries that we're in, and hats off to all of you who are here working on sustainability, this is a hard place to work, right? There are a lot of difficult problems to solve. And so thank you for being part of that solution. I think one of the things that has drawn me to this area is it's enough is enough, right? It's time to get something done. And I am a truth to power person. Now, I will tell you that there are people out here, probably amongst this audience, that sometimes might finesse that way better than I do because my poker face is not very good. And so I think, that confrontation and being able to deal with that, but also how do you get that truth across, whether it's with an account you're consulting with or someone that you're going on to another project with or government officials, whoever it is, that we get that truth out there and we just deal with it, put it on the table and deal with it, right? And it's not always going to be easy because the fact is the industries we're working in, a lot of people don't want to hear it because they don't know what to do. Right. So I think that what you're saying with being able to do that, be resilient, resilience is so important in this work, I think, even more so than many other areas, industries, that you could have chosen. Right.
Is there a pun there that it takes resilience, right? So switching a little bit away from ourselves personally and talking about the industry, what do you think the biggest challenge in the green building industry is at the moment? And then there's a corollary about what excites you. But let's start with, what do we think is the biggest challenge right now in March of 2023 in this green building industry?
Oh, I don't know where to start. But if I had to, so let me just back up and say for a state like New York, this is the biggest nut to crack, full stop. These buildings are so complex and so disparate and so many buildings, not only existing ones, but new ones, right? That we're going to be building along the way. And ultimately, it's not only the most central challenge to addressing our climate change law, but also I would say the biggest challenge with respect to actually executing on it. And I say that because when we look at, as you all know, in a state like New York, the greenhouse gas emission, the majority of our greenhouse gas emissions do come from buildings. And so we've got to work on this. But when we look at what we're touching at NYSERDA as an example, it's got to scale by at least an order of magnitude to achieve these outcomes. And so it is not the case that we can really be thinking about this at all as business as usual. We're hitting about 20,000 buildings a year or thereabouts. Adding a zero to that means in some ways it's freeing, right? Totally different scale. But on the other hand, there's practical aspects of this that are really quite daunting. And I would say it's not a technology issue, actually. I don't see it as that. I think we've got a lot of really interesting technical solutions, and all of you know probably way more about them than I do. But I think the challenge that we have is actually the people side of it. It's the people, not only the people like the occupants of the buildings, like embracing change. Lo and behold, change is hard, even if the change will be better in the end, but change is, I'm definitely not, I'm over my skis on this one, but I've come to realize that, you know, whether it better or worse, change is just hard. So like we're talking about change over decades, of course, but still change. But then on the other side of the equation, due to that scale, it's really the readiness of our workforce and of our people to effectuate that change. And so that's the other side of this, is not only are we trying to really, really tackle our building stock, but we need so many more people to do it. And we need to not do it the way we always did it. So that's, I think, the root of the issue for us, or the challenge for us, is we need to move very quickly. And when you move very quickly, you're sort of inclined to do what you always did, like you're going to take the path of least resistance. But the problem that we have is if we always do what we always did, we'll always get the same outcome. And ultimately, we need not only to build this workforce, but to be much more, embrace so many more people, all people, right? Everyone, people who don't even see themselves in this industry. We need to find ways to get to these people and make this a resource that they can see themselves working within. So for me, it's this challenge of pace and scale that is the fundamental issue. But I think the ways in which we can be more equitable and bring more people together toward these solutions would be my fundamental challenge.
What would you say the subject matter is that you'd start with? Like if you had a group of young people that said, we want to get in, where would you point them so that the needle's going to move more for NYSERDA?
Well, I think in many instances, it is a matter of awareness. Like that's really where it starts. It's awareness for all of us as like solution finders and homeowners and, you know, every type of building typology. But from the other side of the equation, I really don't think people understand what opportunities exist in this space. And I just think that's the kind of thing that, much like anything, the change will have to happen throughout our whole ecosystem, right? From the little kids in the elementary schools all the way up to me and you when we replace our furnaces, knowing what to do, right? So like ultimately, it's a societal shift, and it's one that needs to be included in everything from curricula to advertising. Don't get me started on those home shows on HGTV, but you know, all of it
Yeah.
needs to shift.
Yeah, and you know, the first 80%, we know what to do. And I think everybody in this room knows that we know what we can do and what we have to do. We have to get off of fossil fuels. We have to embrace the idea of scope 3 emissions, which is everybody's responsible for everybody. So you are going to influence your suppliers, you're going to influence your customers. And, you know, and we know that the corporations are working towards that. And that's what's going to happen. So start working in that area and look at the different ways that overlap is happening. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of solutions. I hope that's what, you know, and that's what we're working towards, and I'm seeing it already. So it's good.
So let me just take a little bit of a different tack. How many people in this room are associated with a corporation? Is it just me and Hannah? Not many. All right. So I want to give a little bit of insight into what life is like for the corporate side, and maybe it'll give some empathy, or maybe it'll, you know, start getting you thinking about how do we make this work, right? So on the corporate side of the house, money and profit is still pretty much king, right? And I hate that that's a truth, but it is. And so one of the things that I preach inside of, well, amongst my colleagues, not to everyone, but I say, you know, you can have the carrot or the stick. And as a sustainability person in my corporation, I don't care which one gets used. The stick works equally well. And frankly, with corporations right now, the stick oftentimes is the only thing that makes things happen. So do you have an activist investor? Do you have legislation that's coming down? So I think to the extent that, since we've got such a mass in this room that's not involved with the corporate side, anything we can do to push legislation that makes sense, that can help us do the right thing even if it might cost a little bit more right now, is just going to be incredibly helpful in our fight. And corporations have a big role to play in helping with the climate change problem. And so the more we can enable them to do that with carrots or sticks, the better off we're going to be.
So I'm gonna jump on the wagon here too. But sort of following the logic that you're talking about with regards to money, I'm gonna give an anecdotal example about my mom. My mom was a migrant worker in the US. She's of Mexican descent and grew up very poor. And until the day she died, she did not understand why I was paying more for organic food. I could not convince my mom. And it was like, even though I would explain about, there's less pesticides used and this like affects the farm workers that are working in the fields. It was like, at the end of the day, she could not understand blowing money when there was a perfectly beautiful tomato sitting right next to the organic tomato that cost, 50 cents less. And so I'm using that example not to paint a negative picture of my mom. I deeply respect my mother, but to say that I don't, and this is constructive, not confrontation, Doreen, but disagreeing, that I don't think that it's just about educating people. I think we need to move beyond that. And I think it is about infiltrating corporates, and this needs to be more affordable. One, it needs to be cost competitive with business as usual so that we can stop arguing about how it's going to cost more to do the right thing. And that for it to cost less means that industry has to mass produce the things that we want done. And they have to learn how to deliver it. Thank you, BlocPower, how to deliver it right in a rinse and repeat fashion so that the costs come down and we're not getting price gouge every time we ask a contractor to do something they've never done before. And that means corporations or large businesses have to train people so they know how to do this. So in my opinion, this is almost going to sound Randist, like Ayn Rand, right? Like, forget the consumer. We need to figure out how to do the magic in behind, right? The product that they want to consume that gives them a set of outcomes that they want. A beautiful home that they can feel proud of, a comfortable home, a safe home for their children to grow up in, right? Where they purchase the product and they don't have to go through the brain pain of figuring out what we're asking them to do. So my mom would have bought the organic tomato if it cost the same price, right? But as someone who grew up extremely poor, she was not going to go in there, prissy missy and buy the organic produce, okay? So that is what I think the problem is. And then there's the politics. Somehow we have got to get this to stop being an issue that, certain factions of people can use against us. And we need to change our narrative, right? And we also need to turn the narrative on them about how they're screwing their constituents. Excuse me, I'm getting very passionate about this. Because that is what they're doing, and the stories they tell, they don't even make sense. So we need to find a group of individuals who are charismatic, who can get out there and want to tell this story and want to interact with communities at different socioeconomic levels. It's not just about LMI, it's about people in the middle too. And those are the people in the suburbs that swing from voting for Obama in 2008 and voting for Trump in 2016, same people. So yes, I'm lecturing now, but that's what I think we need. That it goes back to Doreen's hearts and minds and education, but the narrative I think needs to be totally different than how we're thinking about this right now.
Thank you. And I just want to maybe be the moderator between you two and kind of say,
Thanks for the hand.
but I think
We have laws too, I'm just saying. Sticks, we love sticks in here.
I think what you were getting at with, thank you, BlocPower, is what we're doing at BlocPower is, aiming to scale electrification across communities by getting cities on board. But something else that we're doing to help make that happen is building a workforce development piece. And That's kind of, going alongside with these city commitments. And as we're training, we're taking people in underserved communities, people that were previously incarcerated, and what am I doing? Obviously, taking away their handguns and giving them a caulk gun. And so that's, the practical approach, from where I sit, to getting them from knowing nothing about this industry to being, going into a building at the beginning of the day, testing it on a blower door, handing them a caulk gun, showing them how to use it. And then a couple hours later, with minimal materials, testing out an improvement, a 20-30% improvement, whatever it is, and letting them feel that immediate gratification, And, I mean, I know, having brought people up in this industry, is that you're only going to be an air sealer for so long, but you'll like, there is a path from there, and maybe in 5 or 10 years, they decide that they want to be an engineer and they want to be the ones that are designing these buildings and doing this in a big way. But it's such a low barrier, low tech way to bring people in from nothing. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. We had similar ones at the county where people came out of the jail and were trained in installing green roofs. And it was remarkable, the quick lesson and the contribution that people were making, and, had all the work that they could take, or, in a very short amount of time. So I have a final question before we wrap. We have about 10 minutes left, and it's the question about what excites you in the industry right now. And I'll start by saying that the thing that makes me most hopeful and optimistic, and I suppose excited, is that in my experience, young people get it way better than we did. And I think those laws are going to come, the politics are going to change, because they're really aware, and they are exercising their voices at the ballot box. That's been my experience. And I hope we have enough time to wait for them to be a critical mass, but young people are really exciting me in this world right now.
Yeah, and I just want to build on what you said there. I 100% agree. I look at my kids, and things that they're like, yeah, no brainer, is still an issue for, some people that I know that are my age. And so I think you're right on that. And one of the things that I've been trying to build in my program is, how can we bring students in, either through internships or capstone projects, just so that they can get their hands dirty, little pun, with real world problems, while they're still students, so that they can be even more equipped to handle that when they come out into the world. And let's just, fast track that impact that they can have, because I really do believe the kids are the future, right?
Doreen, what's exciting you? Is it the CLCPA
I
passing?
don't know. I'm a little nervous what Martha's going to say, but just kidding. Here's something we'll agree on, I think. I'm super excited about some of the technology solutions that are coming forward. To the point she aptly made, the more the future is, better than the present, the more likely someone's going to make the change, right? Like, ultimately, that's a good thing. And so, like, one perfect example is cold climate heat pumps. I am so glad I can have a legitimately technically proven and frankly commercially available answer to the question that, my heat pump doesn't work in the North Country. Like, thank goodness, but let's get real. That has been an evolution of technology. And ultimately, the fact that we now see adoption curves hitting these inflection points that I believe these 5, 6, 7% points, those are inflection points, people. That's where we start to get past the sort of small group of people who do something versus the mass market appeal that we very much need to realize. And I think that happens because we set the markers, right? That's why states like New York set a goal like we do. It's more about setting a level of ambition that can drive market shifts. And the fact that we're joined by others to do so, it's all the better. And when I see the market following in that respect, like, that's really what we need, is we need new solutions and expanded and improved solutions. And every time I see one, I love it. That's where we need to be.
I agree, but are we to the point where it's cost, the cost is going to compare to a less environmentally friendly choice?
Right now, no, not in New York,
Right.
not even.
And not in a lot of
not
places
in-
either.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be more expensive. It's going to be more expensive
There's some,
everywhere. in a
well,
lot of
there's some
places.
pockets. I think, you know, when we see some of, you know, in New York example, Long Island is a great example of many, many parts of Long Island where it just makes complete economic sense. The challenge that we have is there's certain costs you can drive out, right? Of
Right.
these processes, and there's others that are very difficult to do so. So we're going to start, right? We're going to, as I said, we need to start somewhere. We have laws to do that. And
great.
we'll start with the places that make the economic sense
Yes.
and push through to the scale and cost reductions that we need in the meantime.
Right, and that's, and I definitely agree with that. And so, but right now, where the first steps, those first steps, the first 50%, the first 60%, up to probably up to 80%, we can do that with, you know, where we are and hopefully very cost effectively, you know, but in the end, that last bits, those last bits are going to be, they're going to change everything. If they don't, everything is going to change anyway. So we have, so which way do you want? Do we want to spend all our money on resiliency and climate adaptation? Or are we going to,
Seawalls, right?
or are we going to do something about this now? And so I think that's where a lot of, you know, as you go back out into the world, that's some of that urgency that I think, I hope that everyone takes with them.
Yeah, and whether it's organic food or solar panels on the house or, you know, driving electric cars, if you can do it, you have an obligation to do it. So not everybody can, but those who can have an obligation to do it. Anybody want any, go ahead.
So based on NYSERDA's data, thank you. The price of fossil fuels is rising more quickly than the price of electricity. And so just like the solar industry did
great.
was, you know, they showed people over 15 years or whatever, that you're going to have an ROI in, you know, maybe it's going to be more expensive today, but let's look at it 5 or 7 years down the road and think about it long term, because this is, you know, this is the long game here we're in. So we got to figure out different ways to present this to folks to get them on board today for something that they might not see that financial benefit for a few more years.
Yep, I think that's a really good point. Anything else that is exciting you in this moment in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to sound sort of wonky, but there was this paper that Ezra Klein, basically in an article in the New York Times, did a summary of. It's like the strange, and I can't remember the title of the paper. I apologize. But it was co-written by the current head of the Chicago Federal Reserve, who is now being tapped to be the vice chair of the U.S. Federal Reserve Board of Governors. And it basically is highlighting the stagnation of the construction sector. And I don't know if folks in this room think of themselves as being part of the construction sector. I don't want to jump to a conclusion that you do, but I do.
Yep.
And so I see us sort of trapped inside of a much larger systemic issue with construction in the United States. And I know I'm supposed to be saying what I'm excited about, because this sounds sort of negative, but what I'm excited about is that these like very influential people are finally putting a lens on this and highlighting this systemic issue. And the paper concluded that it is creating drag on the rest of the U.S. economy, right? So it's like, this is not just affecting, you know, people's cost of housing and things like that. It's preventing resources from going into other sectors that will continue to make the U.S. successful and competitive. And so I think that we've got to continue to, you know, elevate this construction, this poor productivity in the construction sector is something that the administration needs to address, and it needs to be a national priority. We need to direct resources on how are we going to improve the productivity in this country. And that might even mean, you know, policy reform around codes and permitting and all kinds of stuff. And so so that's one thing. And then the second thing is that we have the labor shortage, right? Like, no, yes, we need to industrialize, but this is going to be along a continuum and this is going to take time. And we need people right now to do this work. And if we already have, not too bad of an unemployment rate, like where are these people going to come from? So we obviously need to address immigration, right? And like Canada is literally advertising that they're seeking for people to move to Canada. And I think the United States really does need to get its act together on immigration reform, which every administration kicks the can down the road. Don't you love how I love to talk about politics? But it all comes back to politics, let's be honest. And so I think it's time for us to really get serious about this issue and then thinking about how do we bring people into this country and not having them living with 20 of their relatives in subpar conditions, but make it a real opportunity for people to come here, work, get skills, and live equitably within our country when they come and help us to continue to grow and develop. So that's what gets me excited. I think
you,
construction
Martha.
is going to be the starting point. Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll let that be the last word. And thank you all, not only for your time here today sharing, but the work that you're all doing. It's really been an honor and I hope to see you all along the way. Thank you all. Thanks for coming.